Hey guys, tonight we're pulling back the creaky wooden door on medieval life. Not the castles and kings, but the mud-caked, straw-scented world of the people who didn't wear crowns. You're a peasant now, and it's Sunday. The one day you're not hunched over a turnip field, unless of course the lord of the manor says otherwise. Birds chirp. Cows are suspiciously awake. Your feet are sore. Your soul? Slightly less so, because today you go to church. You probably won't survive this. Statistically speaking, you're one bout of food poisoning or a stubbed toe away from the afterlife. But don't worry, today's about fun. Well, the medieval version of it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up early because, as always, God does not respect your sleep schedule. The church bell tolls like it's personally offended by your hangover. You trudge through the village, past thatched roofs and maybe a pig or two, to your local parish church. It's not grand, more leaning stone rectangle than cathedral, but it's the beating spiritual heart of your tiny world. Inside, it smells like damp wool and incense. You shuffle into the nave, nodding at neighbors with a kind of grim solidarity. No one really talks yet. Too early. And besides, everyone's scanning the room to see who's here, who's absent, and who's whispering a little too closely to that widow who got caught smuggling eggs last month. The service begins. You don't understand Latin, but you've learned to nod at the right times. The priest sings in a voice that sounds vaguely like a rusty hinge, and the congregation dutifully echoes with the energy of people trying not to fall asleep standing up. The host is offered. Prayers are mumbled, and somewhere behind you, a child lets out an impressive sneeze. This is your weekly reset, not just spiritually, though that too, but socially, because attending Mass is required. Not going, that's a fine, or worse, penance. It's also how you find out who died, who married, who's been excommunicated, and whether old Peter's cow has finally calved. Church is the medieval Facebook feed, but with more kneeling. Historians still argue whether peasants found these services spiritually moving or just socially necessary. Some suggest real devotion ran deep. Others think it was more about not getting fined and having somewhere dry to be for an hour. After the sermon, the priest might read out royal decrees, local disputes, or an update about taxes you didn't even know you owed. Occasionally, a sinner would be publicly shamed, standing barefoot near the altar in a sackcloth tunic, while everyone tried not to stare, and absolutely stared. Once it's over, the village oozes out of the church like honey from a cracked comb, stretching, talking, judging. You're allowed to exhale now. Outside, the sun has risen a little higher, and you suddenly remember that you skipped breakfast. But more importantly, you survived the most formal part of the day. Time to swap soul cleansing for something with a bit more ale. Before you go, though, you notice the priest talking with a small cluster of young men near the side chapel. They're not planning a holy pilgrimage. They're organizing next weekend's wrestling match, with blessings, naturally. You trudge back toward the village square, passing the baker's boy who's already halfway into a loaf of rye and a couple of hens who look like they've had better mornings. You hear someone laugh, loudly, the kind of laugh that says, "I heard what you did with the hay cart and Agnes last Thursday." Quaint, isn't it? A Sunday morning filled with whispered confessions, awkward side glances, and that one guy who never quite knows when to sit down during Mass. Oh, and a fun fact, some churches in England had church ales, fundraisers where ale was brewed and sold after service to raise money for parish upkeep. That's right, your priest was, in some ways, your bartender. Praise be. And yes, there were rules. The church didn't want things to get too fun. Officially, Sundays were a day of rest and prayer, but as long as you went to Mass, you had some wiggle room. Just don't skip, ever. So here you are, a little lighter in the soul, a little more awake, and ready to see what mischief the rest of Sunday has in store. You survived the incense. You avoided eye contact with that one guy who always coughs during communion, and you didn't fall asleep on your feet. Time to reward yourself. You don't head home just yet. Instead, your feet steer you automatically to the alehouse, as if they've memorized the way better than your head ever could. You're not alone. The whole village seems to shuffle that direction, like hungover sheep in pursuit of one holy grail. Something warm, something strong, and someone to complain to. The alehouse isn't a pub as you'd know it today. It's a smoky, creaky room inside someone's house, usually a widow or enterprising couple, where ale is brewed in great cauldrons that bubble ominously in the back. The smell hits you before you cross the threshold. Yeast, damp straw, and just the faintest whiff of burnt something. You open the door and step into what can only be described as a glorious mixture of chaos and steam. You slide onto a bench already occupied by a piglet sleeping under the table and a neighbor named Marjorie who has, without asking, begun to describe her latest rash in extraordinary detail. You nod politely. She's on her third cup already. Ale isn't just a drink here. It's calories, hydration, and medicine, depending on who you ask. The weak stuff, called small ale, is practically your version of water. The strong stuff, which you're handed in a clay cup still warm from the hearth, is Sunday's blessing in liquid form. The bread follows, dense, brown, flecked with seeds, sometimes pebbles. It tastes like effort and necessity, but you're grateful. You dip a chunk into your ale and chew slowly. Around you, the room hums with stories, snorts, and the sound of someone arguing with a chicken in the corner. That's probably Thomas. He always brings his chicken, calls it Sir Featherly. You lean in as the gossip begins. Marjorie is now whispering about how the blacksmith's daughter was seen talking behind the church with a traveling peddler. He had bright shoes, she says, eyes wide, as if fashion itself were a sin. Someone else swears they saw the Reeve take an extra sack of grain last week. You file that information away. Could be useful, or just hilarious. Historians still argue whether alehouses were primarily places of relaxation or centers of low-level subversion. Were they harmless communal spaces or breeding grounds for rebellion and sin? Probably both. You're pretty sure if the bishop walked in right now, he'd faint straight into the butter churn. It's warm in here. Your shoulders ease. You're no longer just a peasant. You're a member of something larger, older, and louder than any lord's charter. This is where the real village politics happen. Who's getting married? Who owes whom a chicken? Who accidentally burned their thatch roof last Thursday, but won't admit it? Oh, and fun fact, ale tasters were official village roles. Your job, if elected, would be to sample every batch sold to the public. Which sounds great until you remember this includes the barley soupy disasters brewed by people who can't tell yeast from cow dung. There's also a surprising amount of singing. Not the choral hymns from Mass. These are bawdy, catchy, rhyming songs that usually involve either bodily functions or unfortunate neighbors. Someone begins one about a miller and a goat that makes even the pigs look uncomfortable. You join in on the chorus because you've heard it enough to know the goat wins in the end. The alehouse also doubles as a theater of sorts. If a traveler's in town, they'll be brought here, offered a drink, and then grilled for stories. You once heard a man from York describe a fair with a dancing bear and a monk who could fart on command. That story's now village canon. You notice a group in the corner bent over something shiny. Knucklebones, a game of chance made from actual sheep bones. They're betting with coins, buttons, and once, in a moment of questionable judgment, someone's shoe. You consider joining, but remember last time you lost your belt. Not again. Marjorie leans in once more. Did you hear about the Lord's son? You haven't. She launches into a tale involving haylofts, a missing pair of breeches, and an angry goose. You sip your ale and nod solemnly. Goose-related scandals are notoriously volatile. The hours pass. The sun climbs. Someone starts dancing. Awkwardly, joyously. A fiddle appears, possibly summoned. And while your belly's warm and your ears full of song and scandal, you realize that this, right now, is what Sunday means to you. The church said you mustn't labor. The law said you mustn't gamble. The Lord said you mustn't gather in groups too large. But here you are, gathering, gaming, gossiping. Nobody's working, but everybody's building something. Memory, community, mischief. Eventually, someone knocks over a bench. The piglet wakes up. The dancing slows. You step outside into the cool air, blinking like a mole. The day's far from over, and there's talk of a ball game in the lower field. Time to walk it off and maybe get bruised in the name of peasant recreation. One more fact before we go. Alehouses were occasionally shut down by the local manor if they got too rowdy. Which raises the question, how rowdy is too rowdy in a village where someone once tried to sell boiled eel as medicinal stew? You sigh, pat your stomach, and head toward the noise. Sunday's still young. You don't need a trumpet or a town crier to know where the next Sunday spectacle is happening. The yelling gives it away. As you round the edge of the common field, you see a crowd already forming, buzzing like bees who've had a bit too much ale. It's time for the village football match. Now let's be clear. Football doesn't mean jerseys, referees, or even a ball shaped like anything aerodynamic. This is medieval football, the kind where the ball might be an inflated pig's bladder and the rules are more like suggestions shouted too late to prevent injury. You shuffle to the edge of the makeshift pitch, more of a swampy clearing really, and spot two roughly defined teams, East End versus West End of the village. Shirts? Optional. Shoes? Laughable. One guy is literally wearing a bucket on his head. The game begins with no warning. Someone just chucks the ball skyward and everyone charges. What follows is less sport and more mildly organized riot. People push, trip, grab, and yell at each other in the friendliest way possible for folks who just exchanged blows with turnips last week. You spot a lad from your end tackle an older man into a bramble bush. Points? No one's sure. Style? 10 out of 10. Historians still argue whether these games were sanctioned by the church or barely tolerated chaos. Some sources suggest priests even played. Others claim bishops tried to ban them outright. Either way, you doubt anyone here's asking permission. Too busy running. You inch closer, cheering when someone from your side grabs the ball and lurches toward the other end. Technically, the millstone by the old elm. That's the goal. It's not much, but it's where dreams go to get tackled. A player slams into the mud with a grunt, but pops up laughing, his tunic soaked and one shoe missing. No one calls time out. There is no time out. There's barely time to breathe. The game flows like water through a sieve. Messy, relentless, and impossible to predict. You feel the itch, the temptation, and before you can talk yourself out of it, you're in. Charging, ducking, grabbing the back of someone's belt to slow them down. You hear someone shout, "Oi!" But it's a good-natured oi, the kind that says, let's bruise each other and still share bread later. The ball squishes under your arm like a wriggling animal. You sprint, legs slipping in the mud, breath ragged. A blur of color comes at you from the side. A tackle. You go down in a tangle of limbs and laughter. The ball rolls loose, forgotten for a moment as you and your tackler groan and chuckle in the same breath. A few minutes later, you crawl out of the fray, breathless and flushed, cheeks aching from grinning. You flop onto the grass beside a woman who just socked someone in the shin 5 minutes ago. She hands you a bit of cloth to dab your forehead, possibly clean, possibly her apron. Good form, she says. You nod, still winded. She's missing a tooth and grinning like a legend. Fun fact, Edward II actually banned football in 1314, calling it a great noise in the city caused by hustling over large balls. You wonder if he ever played. Probably not. Would have done him good. The game ends not with a score, but a collective collapse. Someone declares the West Side won. Someone else argues the East scored twice. No one really cares. The ball disappears, possibly into a ditch, possibly into someone's soup pot for later. Either way, it's over. People limp back toward the village, comparing bruises and exchanging playful threats about next week. A dog runs by carrying someone's boot. No one bothers to chase it. As you trudge toward a shady tree to rest, you catch bits of conversation. Next time we'll tie bells to them, someone says, like the French do. You have no idea if the French do that. It sounds absurd. And also weirdly plausible. You lie back in the grass, staring at the clouds drifting above. Your chest still rises and falls quickly, but there's a deep satisfaction rooted in your bones now. You weren't a plowhand or a taxpayer or even a subject of the crown out there. You were just part of the chaos, gloriously muddy and hilariously free. And remember those scholarly debates? Some argue these games were a form of social release, controlled violence, a way to let off steam. Others say they reinforced community bonds, maybe both. Maybe you just like a good excuse to run into someone full speed and not apologize. A bee floats lazily above your nose. You swat it away with the elegance of a sun-dazed squirrel. Nearby, someone's already talking about organizing a race next week. Sack race, possibly. Or a wife-carrying competition, which last year ended in a dislocated ankle and a wedding. You chuckle, stretch, and close your eyes for a moment. The day's only half spent, but your Sunday's already earned its place in the slow, delicious rhythm of your life. You don't even make it back to the village square before someone calls out, "Cockfight at the smithy," and suddenly your feet have other plans. You groan slightly, brush a smear of mud off your tunic, and pivot toward the noise. Because while bruised ribs and grass stains are fun, nothing draws a crowd like a battle between two highly irritable birds. The smithy's yard is already ringed with people by the time you arrive. Half the village by the look of it. The smell of scorched iron from earlier that morning still hangs in the air. mixing now with straw, sweat, and excitement. You hear the crows calling overhead, nature's unofficial peanut gallery, and squeeze into the crowd near a wooden crate doubling as a betting stand. The arena is a rough patch of dirt cleared of tools, rakes, and one confused goose. In the center, two roosters glare at each other like they've just been insulted in flawless Latin. Their handlers crouch nearby, whispering encouragements or curses. Hard to tell. You lean on the fence post, elbow brushing the wool sleeve of a tanner who smells like 10 years of salted leather. "Who's the favorite?" you ask casually. "Dark ones got bite," he mutters, "but the white ones from up north. Northern birds don't mess about." The bell rings, not really a bell, more of a horseshoe banged against an anvil, and they're off. Feathers fly, beaks snap. It's a blur of wings and indignation, punctuated by shouts and gasps, and the occasional "that's my chicken" from someone who clearly regrets loaning their bird. Now look, you're not a violent person, but there's something undeniably mesmerizing about two birds throwing down like feathered gladiators. It's theatrical, it's raw, it's weirdly sophisticated. Historians still argue whether animal fighting was truly a peasant pastime or imported from higher classes trying to impress the masses. Some think it was part of older pagan rituals. Others blame sheer boredom. You think it's just another excuse to cheer and yell and forget about taxes for a while. And it's not just cockfighting. After the feathers settle and someone begrudgingly hands over a turnip in payment, that was the bet. Another voice pipes up, "Badger baiting at the back field?" You wince. That one's less funny, a little darker. A badger is brought out in a sack by a man with an unfortunate mustache and no sense of shame. It's all spectacle, but the mood shifts slightly. Less cheering now, more edge. You drift toward the edge of the crowd. Not everything has to be entertaining. But just as you're thinking of sneaking off, something much more wholesome grabs your eye. Children, not yours thankfully, are herding a small group of animals into a makeshift arena of hay bales and laundry baskets. "Peasant pet show," someone says with a wink. You wander over, curious. The lineup includes a goose with a ribbon, a particularly judgmental sheep, a goat who keeps trying to eat the sign, and a cat that may or may not be there voluntarily. The children are beaming. The animals, tolerating. It's chaotic, beautiful. You watch a boy try to get his rooster to jump through a hoop. It doesn't. It stares at him with the kind of disdain only poultry can truly manage. Everyone laughs anyway. You remember your own childhood, racing frogs in the marshes, daring each other to kiss hedgehogs. Bad idea. And once trying to train a duck to respond to clapping. It never did, but you swore it looked offended. Then there's the pig. Someone has dressed it in a hat. No one questions this. The pig wins. A fun fringe fact for you. Some medieval festivals crowned animal kings. A goat, a dog, or once famously, a cat, treated like royalty for the day, complete with fake scepter and everything. You wonder what it says about society when your village's most respected leader is a goose in a crown. Honestly, might be an improvement. As the pet show winds down and the sun reaches its peak, the crowd begins to scatter, some to nap, some to snack, and some to argue about whether a sheep should have beaten the cat for best personality. You stretch your arms and feel the ache of the morning's game creep into your shoulders. But it's a good ache, earned, and you smile, thinking of the contrast. Brutal bird fights, silly pet shows, and everything in between. That's medieval Sunday fun in a nutshell. There's no schedule, no structure, just a constant shuffle between mischief and marvel. One moment you're wincing at flapping wings, the next you're clapping for a pig in a bonnet. And as you walk back toward the square, the sounds of music start again. Faint, rhythmic, calling to your feet like an old friend. There's dancing ahead, and maybe, just maybe, more bread. You follow the music like a moth to candlelight, though in your case, the candle smells faintly of sweat and spring onions. The field just past the granary has transformed into a kind of rustic dance floor, uneven earth, patches of wildflowers, and enough muddy footprints to suggest this isn't the first time villagers have danced here without bothering about rain the night before. A young lad with a fiddle is perched on a barrel, scraping out a tune that sounds like a mix between a lullaby and a barn catching fire. Someone's banging a drum that may once have been a butter tub. And just like that, couples are spinning, wide skirts twirling, boots thudding, laughter rising like birds startled from hedgerows. You shuffle closer, shoulder brushing a man who smells aggressively of cheese. "You dancing today?" he asks, offering a grin with 2 teeth missing but none of his charm. "Thinking about it," you reply, trying not to get elbowed by a spinning couple. He shrugs. "Don't think too hard. That's how we lost the miller last week." You don't ask for clarification. Now, this isn't courtly dancing. There are no refined steps, no elegant bows, no powdered wigs. This is peasant dancing, improvised, joyful, and occasionally dangerous. You spot a woman swing a man so hard his hat flies off and lands on a goat. The goat doesn't seem to mind. The man asks the goat if it wants a turn. You ease into the rhythm slowly, clapping along at first, then letting your feet tap. Someone grabs your hand, an old friend, or maybe someone you've only met once during planting season, and suddenly, you're pulled into the swirl. Around you, people are forming loose circles, weaving in and out, hands linked or raised. Your heartbeat syncs with the drum. The world narrows into color and sound and the soft squelch of wet grass. Historians still argue whether these dances had deeper meanings, fertility rites, seasonal celebrations, or coded rituals hidden under layers of frolic. One chronicler wrote that these gatherings invited mischief and clouded virtue, which you think is just a fancy way of saying someone had too much fun and fell into a ditch. And fun fact, some of these dances had names that sound like lost medieval sitcoms. The haymaker's jig, picking of sticks, and your personal favorite, the cushion dance, which may or may not involve sitting on people unexpectedly. But the star of today's scene is the maypole. Tall, painted, and very slightly crooked from last year's enthusiastic tug of war, it stands like a colorful sentinel in the middle of the field. Ribbons hang from its top, fluttering in the breeze like serpents looking for dance partners. With a cheer, people begin to gather around it. Children get the short ribbons. Adults take the long ones. You grab one and take a breath. Then you're moving. To the left, cross. Behind, turn. The steps are simple, but the pattern they weave is beautiful, a spiral of color forming like magic with each pass. You make eye contact with the person across from you. They grin, you grin back. The music speeds up. So do your feet. And just as you're starting to feel confident, bam! Someone trips. Another crashes into you. The pattern collapses like badly folded laundry. There's a brief tangle of limbs, apologies, and someone blaming a molehill that may or may not exist. Everyone laughs. You pick yourself up, brush straw off your shoulder, and start again. This is what Sunday was made for, letting loose after 6 long days of scraping, hauling, sewing, and obeying. Dancing was one of the few things no lord could tax, and no priest could truly ban, though a few tried. Even the stiffest monk can't stop a whole village from having rhythm. As the sun slants westward and shadows stretch across the grass, couples peel off from the crowd. Some seek shade. Others head toward the alehouse for a second round. A few disappear entirely behind haystacks, which may lead to a future baptism announcement. A woman near you spins with her eyes closed, dress whipping around her knees, hair sticking to her brow. She laughs with the kind of abandon only Sunday can justify. You realize then that joy, for all its softness, has deep roots here, woven through music, motion, and mud. You finally slow your steps, heart pounding, breath coming in gasps. Someone hands you a chunk of cheese and slaps your back so hard you nearly choke on it. A high compliment, apparently. Nearby, someone is teaching a younger group a circle dance. You hear the chant, "Turn and twirl, the fields are green, leave your worry, dance unseen." It sounds old, maybe ancient, maybe made up 5 minutes ago, doesn't matter. It's catchy. One more fringe tidbit. In some villages, local clergy joined the dancing, albeit reluctantly, to keep an eye on virtue. Others locked the church doors and refused to let dancers near the cemetery, as if fun might disturb the dead. You wipe your brow and take a seat under a tree, watching the colors spin, hearing the thud of feet and the occasional shriek of surprise. Your legs are sore, your mouth dry, and there's a leaf in your hair. But you wouldn't trade this moment for a dozen gold coins, unless the gold came with cheese. The field glows golden. A chicken walks through the dancers, entirely unbothered. The fiddle plays on, and somewhere nearby, someone starts to hum. The air's gone soft now, heavy with sun and the mingled scents of sweat, fresh grass, and someone nearby gnawing on what can only be described as extremely hopeful mutton. Your limbs are jelly, your stomach's starting to consider mutiny, and yet your eyes drift toward the barns, the hedgerows, the corners where shadows linger a bit longer, not because you're hiding, but because something else is starting to stir. Romance, not the kind with violins and moonlight, the medieval peasant version. Practical, muddy, occasionally interrupted by livestock. You stroll toward the edge of the field, pretending you're just admiring the view. But really, you're noticing the clusters forming, 2s, 3s, couples half concealed behind hayricks, whispering low, some laughing, some blushing, some very clearly not whispering at all. This is what you might call churchyard courting, because after Sunday Mass, and after ale and dancing and laughter have softened the sharp edges of life, there's room, just a little, for sweetness, for stolen glances across pews, for secret meetings behind barns, for promises whispered between bites of barley cake. You pass a young man nervously holding out a wildflower to a girl with calloused hands and a world-weary smile. She takes it. He tries not to faint. It's oddly charming. And for a moment you forget just how often medieval life smells like manure. Historians still argue whether peasant marriages were driven by love or by livestock. Did you marry because your heart stirred? Or because her family had 3 hens and half a cart? Probably both. But Sundays were when love had its best chance to bloom, when work paused just long enough for feelings to sneak in like starlings through a thatched roof. And the maypole dances? More than just twirls. They were social chess games. Who danced with whom? Who lingered longer? Who accidentally tied their ribbon to yours and then pretended it was fate? There's one girl you've danced with before. She wears red ribbons, smiles with her whole face. You see her now, leaning against a fence post, chatting with a friend, but clearly aware of your gaze. You walk past casually. She doesn't stop you, but she doesn't look away either. There's potential in that silence. Fun fact, in some regions, medieval couples would test a partnership by living together for a trial year. If the union produced a child or survived the seasonal floods, it was made official. Love and mud, the twin tests of time. Somewhere behind the barn, you hear laughter, a low chuckle followed by a very breathy shh, the kind of shh that guarantees absolutely no one is shushing. You keep walking. A group of young people are playing a courtship game near the edge of the orchard. You recognize it. The broken ring. Everyone stands in a circle. One person walks behind the rest, drops a kerchief, and the chase begins. It's simple, innocent, and always ends with someone breathless and someone trying very hard not to seem disappointed. You sit near the edge, nibbling on a hunk of soft cheese that someone's grandmother pressed into your hand. Watching, waiting, remembering how it felt the first time someone looked at you like that, like the rest of the village had faded away and only your muddy boots and nervous smile remained. And here's the thing. For all the talk of duty and dowries and arranged matches, peasants weren't without emotion. They just had to find room for it between chores and church bells. Sunday wasn't just a day off. It was a sliver of space where feelings got to stretch their legs. Some songs drift your way now, not the bawdy ones from the alehouse, but gentler tunes, love ballads sung half seriously, half ironically. One girl sings about a sailor who never came back. Another hums about a knight who left his heart, and apparently his trousers, in a meadow. A boy tries to impress his crush by juggling 3 apples. He drops 2. She applauds anyway. You can't help but smile. One more quirky tidbit. In some villages, matchmaking was overseen by a designated elder, or, weirdly, the miller's wife, who everyone believed had an eye for hearts. It was less about destiny, more about who could stand each other through winter. You lean back, letting the sun warm your face, hearing the rustle of linen and the flutter of flirtation all around you. You remember when you were younger, the nervous anticipation of dancing next to someone you liked, the thrill of a shared joke, the occasional terror of realizing her father was watching. The girl with the red ribbons passes you again. This time, she looks directly at you, smiles, then keeps walking. That's not a no. You dust yourself off. It's not courtly love. It's not a grand romance, but it's real. It's muddy and modest and wrapped in cheese and wildflowers and nerves, and it's happening right here, on a peasant Sunday, when the world softens just enough to let your heart beat faster. Later in the afternoon, when the heat has mellowed and the children are starting to lie flat in the grass like overcooked dumplings, someone pulls out a cloth bag of bones. Sheep bones. Well, technically, knuckle bones, the dried ankle bones of a lamb or goat, each about the size of a walnut and shaped like something you might step on barefoot and regret immediately. The players gather quickly, sitting in a circle on the dry patch of earth beside the granary wall. You join them, curious, because games like this, simple, ancient, oddly addictive, are a cornerstone of peasant fun. Knucklebones is kind of like jacks meets dice meets minor gambling. The bones are tossed, flicked, caught on the back of hands, or sometimes balanced on fingers depending on the rules, which vary wildly from village to village. Today's version: you toss 5 bones into the air and try to catch as many as possible on the back of your hand. If you drop them all, you get teased. If you catch 3 or more, you're temporarily a legend. You watch a wiry lad toss. He catches 4. The group gasps like he's just turned barley into gold. Someone claps. Someone else mutters, "Witchcraft." Now it's your turn. The bones are surprisingly cold, even in the afternoon sun. You shake them in your palm, then toss. One lands in your lap. One goes rogue into the grass. The rest bounce off your knuckles like disgruntled marbles. 0. A child claps. Not for you. For the comedy. Historians still argue whether games like knucklebones were strictly for children or whether adults indulged just as much, especially on Sundays. Some suggest they had spiritual origins, fortune-telling perhaps. Others say it was just what you did when dice were banned and your fingers were still flexible. Next up, stool ball. A game that sounds like a punishment, but is, in fact, an early ancestor of cricket. You're handed a flat, circular paddle, usually made from firewood, and pointed toward a target, a milking stool balanced upright in the grass. The goal? Keep the ball from hitting the stool. The ball is made of cloth, wrapped tight, stuffed with something mysterious: beans, straw, the tears of whoever last lost this game, and thrown underhand from about 6 feet away. You take your stance, feet apart, paddle raised. A group gathers to watch. The thrower winds up, tosses. You swing. Miss the ball, hits the stool with a hollow thunk. Everyone cheers, because no one is actually rooting for you to win. Not yet. Not until you earn it. You laugh, toss the ball back, and reset. This time, you make contact. The ball flies sideways and hits a very startled chicken. A woman near you smirks. That's 2 points for originality. Other games emerge as the sun dips lower. Hoodman blind, a sort of proto-blindfold tag where one person stumbles around blind while everyone else whispers just out of reach. You remember playing it as a child, clutching at the air, giddy with the fear of being touched by unseen fingers. It's more fun when you're not the hoodman. A pair of boys play log getting, which is less of a game and more of a competitive tree-dragging contest. Someone shouts, "Whoever brings the biggest branch gets Marjorie's last turnip." That's motivation. One girl lays out stones in a grid, something like medieval hopscotch. She jumps, skips, sings a rhyme about cats, death, and butter. You try not to overthink it. Fun fact, some village games involved live animals. Goose chasing was a thing. And yes, it was exactly what it sounds like. You chased a greased goose, or worse, you rode a greased pig. It was chaos. It was tradition. It was how you earned bruises that you couldn't explain to your grandmother. And let's not forget catch the stick, where a short stick is dropped suddenly, and whoever grabs it first wins. Nothing, just glory. Maybe a piece of pie if someone's nan is watching. But the best game? The King's Whisper? It's like telephone. One person whispers a phrase, usually ridiculous, to their neighbor, who passes it along. By the time it reaches the last person, it's mutated into nonsense. Today's started as, "The blacksmith's cow sings at dawn," and ended as, "The bishop's towel smells of frogs." Tears. Absolute tears. You stretch your arms above your head as the last game winds down. Your back cracks. Someone nearby is teaching a toddler to juggle apples. Someone else is trying to stack rocks in the shape of a duck. A man claims he once beat a traveling merchant at Fox and Geese and won a sausage for it. You believe him, mostly. Historians love to study taxes and warfare, but what they sometimes forget, what you now feel deep in your bones, is that laughter is history too. The games, the giggles, the mud between your toes, and the sharp joy of catching a knucklebone just right. These were the things that stitched peasant life together. And as the light shifts to a warm amber hue, you look around at your friends, your neighbors, and even that one guy who still hasn't returned your ladder. You smile. You'll get him next week. The sun droops lower now, tilting its golden bowl toward the hills, and the sky begins its slow melt into peach and lavender. The village's pulse, though softer, hasn't stopped. It's merely shifted. The clang of paddle games has faded. The maypole is tangled in its own ribbons, and the alehouse sings a little quieter now. You follow the smell of wood smoke to the edge of the square, where a low fire crackles inside a stone ring. Around it, people gather, not to shout or dance or debate chickens this time, but to listen. Old Ruth has taken her seat, that familiar three-legged stool with one leg shorter than the rest. She plants herself like an ancient oak, crooked and undeniable, and the younger folk settle on the ground before her. It's story time. This is a tradition, an unofficial Sunday rite, the storytelling circle. It's older than most of the buildings in your village, maybe older than the dirt you're sitting on. You find a comfortable spot near a mossy stump and rest your elbows on your knees. Ruth clears her throat with the gravity of a queen, preparing to pass judgment, and silence falls like a heavy cloak. Her voice begins as a whisper, slow, dry, and deliberate. Long ago, she says, before the church bell rang and before men forgot how to speak to trees, there was a saint who could tame beasts with just his shadow. The story unfurls like cloth from a loom. A saint with a voice that calmed storms. A dragon that demanded cheese instead of virgins. A bishop who bathed only once a decade and still smelled of roses, though possibly because he slept on lavender leaves. Not that anyone dared ask. You chuckle. So does the group. And just like that, the spell deepens. Historians still argue whether these oral traditions pass down factual events, metaphors, or simply entertainment. Probably all three. One scholar called them the village's heartbeat, a memory bank with no ink, no paper, just breath and time. The children hang on every word. So do the adults, though they hide it better, pretending to whittle or chew slowly while their ears twitch with every twist of Ruth's tale. She's in rare form tonight. Her voice dips low, and when the saint came to the ford near Bell Hollow, he met a creature made of mud and teeth, but instead of slaying it, he offered his shoe, because even monsters need something to believe in. You raise an eyebrow. That's new. Or maybe she just made it up. Doesn't matter. You're hooked. Another voice joins her, young Tom, full of eagerness and not nearly enough timing. He jumps in with a local tale about a traveling juggler who fooled a nobleman into giving him 3 silver coins by pretending to be blind, only to walk directly into a pond moments later. Classic. Fun fact, traveling entertainers like that juggler, also called gleemen, were often looked down on by both church and nobility, but welcomed eagerly by peasants. They were news, theater, and scandal, all rolled into one muddy pair of boots. Now the fire pops. Sparks spiral up into the dusk. Someone passes around roasted chestnuts. You take a handful, warm in your palm, and savor the soft crunch. Smoke clings to your sleeves. Laughter drifts in gentle waves. The next story comes from Martha, who rarely speaks, but always shocks when she does. Hers is a darker tale, about the girl who challenged death to a game of riddles. They say she won too, but no one's quite sure what her prize was. Maybe it was time. Maybe it was silence. You shiver, not from cold. And then there's the tale you've heard a dozen times, but still love. The one about the bishop who tried to walk across a frozen pond to escape a sermon he found boring. The ice held. His dignity didn't. Bishop's breeches, someone whispers behind you. You snort. This part of Sunday is different, quieter, more sacred in its own way than Mass. Here, people don't confess to priests. They confess to laughter, to memory, to the ancient power of a good yarn told slowly, with just the right pause before the twist. You realize that in this moment, no one is their role. No one is a reeve, a serf, a miller's son, or a widow with too many cats. They're listeners, imaginers, dreamers sitting at the feet of a flickering fire, waiting to hear what happens next. A dog curls up near your leg. Someone yawns. The fire dies down a little. Ruth's voice lowers for the final tale. It's about a stone hidden in the woods that, when touched at midnight, shows you the life you might have lived if you'd turned left instead of right. No one knows where it is. Some say they've found it. Others say it only shows itself to those with a clean conscience. So probably not you. One last fun tidbit. Some medieval stories were coded lessons. A dragon might be greed, a forest, temptation, a talking sheep, usually the church, but sometimes a sheep is just a sheep with an unusually strong opinion. The embers glow. Ruth leans back, blinking slowly. No formal goodbye. Just the kind of silence that says, you've had enough for one night. And everyone agrees. You rise, joints stiff, eyes heavy. The crowd begins to disperse. You stretch, watching the shadows retreat into the trees, stories still echoing in your ears. Some of them true, all of them real. And as you walk back toward the village, feet crunching soft leaves, you realize something. These tales aren't just stories, they're home. The moon's not quite risen yet, but the stars are poking through the indigo sky like tiny holes in a blacksmith's apron. Your belly is full of chestnuts and laughter, and your heart still hums with the rhythm of old tales. But Sunday isn't done with you yet, not by a long shot. You turn a corner past the bakery, its ovens long cooled, and hear the muffled sound of giggles, those unmistakable ones, not quite innocent, not quite scandalous, definitely curious. Something's happening near the hay carts. You creep closer, drawn by the pull of ritual mischief. And there they are, villagers, mostly young, some with faces still flushed from dancing, others already donning masks of linen and bark, animal hides and straw wigs. You recognize this. It's the start of Charivari, the ancient game of mockery and madness that somehow always makes its way into Sunday evening, like a raccoon through a cracked pantry door. It starts simple. A boy is married to a cow. There's a priest, a broom as a cross, and someone playing the role of crying mother-in-law using a cabbage as a handkerchief. Everyone hoots as the ceremony devolves into chaos. The cow kicks over a bucket of pretend wine. Someone yells, "Divorce!" and a pig squeals on cue. You clap along, unable to help yourself. Historians still argue whether these rough games were harmless fun or forms of social regulation, public shaming in disguise. Some think they served as a way to mock inappropriate behavior, like bad marriages, greedy neighbors, or men who sang soprano a little too well. Others say it was just peasants letting off steam in the only way they knew how, by being ridiculous. Tonight, it's just joy. Rude, wild, performative joy. Someone hands you a mask. It's a sheep's face, slightly cross-eyed. You shrug and put it on. Suddenly, you're not you anymore. You're the spectral ram of Eastfield, according to a girl wearing a rooster beak who announces things with great authority. She taps you on the head with a ladle. Speak your prophecy. You bellow. I foresee extra eggs next Thursday. They cheer. Someone throws a bread crust at you in celebration. Then comes the blessing game, an ancient tradition that makes no sense and all the sense in the world at once. Each player must bless the person to their left, but only using rhymes. Bad rhymes, silly rhymes. You look to your left. It's the goat handler, Gareth, who once tried to marry a log during last winter's cider festival. You clear your throat. May your socks remain hole free, and your goat not eat your knee. The crowd laughs. Gareth bows. The rooster girl claps. You're a poet now, apparently. Fun fact: medieval villagers often had mock rites, miniature ceremonies that parodied the real ones, pseudo-baptisms for misbehaving animals, ridiculous weddings. Once, in a Flemish village, a group performed a fake last rite for a shoe that had died in a puddle. Was it sacrilegious? Maybe. But mostly, it was hilarious. The mood shifts again when someone pulls out the mask of secrets, a large, lumpy thing made of tree bark, feathers, and string. The wearer must speak a truth while wearing it, something real, something they wouldn't say out loud without a disguise. A girl slips it on. I stole 3 apples from the baker last month and blamed the priest's dog. Gasp. Applause. A boy follows. I dreamt last week I kissed the reeve and liked it. Screams. Laughter. Possibly one reeve fainting in the bushes. You hesitate, then take the mask when it comes to you. You think for a moment, then say, "Sometimes I like milking the cows because it's peaceful." Silence. Then a warm chuckle from someone behind you. "That's not a confession," they say. "That's therapy." The mask passes on. What started as jest now feels deeper. There's power in play, not just for laughs, but for airing things that can't survive in daylight. Feelings, frustrations, hope, wrapped in bark and rhyme and fake marriages to livestock. Nearby, 2 boys reenact a trial for a wooden spoon that allegedly whispers evil things. The sentence? 15 minutes buried in grain. You help with the digging. And while all this seems like nonsense, and most of it is, you realize something important. These rituals, as absurd as they look, are glue. They bind the people here, make them feel less like survivors of toil and more like co-conspirators in joy. One last tidbit. In some villages, Charivari became so organized it had a set of roles: official jesters, noisemakers, even a judge who wore his wife's dress backwards. The whole thing was a topsy-turvy echo of power, flipping the world for just one night. A bit of borrowed rebellion. As the final game winds down, someone smashes a cabbage over their own head. The rooster girl declares, "Order is restored," and collapses dramatically into a pile of straw. The crowd cheers. You remove your sheep mask, your face damp with laughter and just a little sweat. People begin drifting away, toward homes, toward lovers, toward sleep. But your steps are lighter now. You've been ridiculous. You've been someone else for a while. And it felt good. The village square is quieter now, but the echoes of those rituals, the masks, the rhymes, the secrets, linger in the air like candle smoke. And tomorrow, when you're up before dawn, knee-deep in compost and duties again, you'll remember tonight, the ladle, the prophecy, the goat that definitely winked at you. And you'll smile. There's something about the promise of a fair that turns even the weariest peasant into a child again. So when you hear the clanging of a dulcimer and the unmistakable creak of carts rolling over packed earth, you know what's coming. You feel it in your chest, like the first smell of roasting hazelnuts or the distant shout of a vendor hawking something suspiciously described as magical ointment. The fair is setting up. It's not every Sunday, of course, but on festival weekends or in honor of a saint who, allegedly, performed a miracle involving 3 doves and a particularly judgmental cabbage, the fair arrives in a swirl of chaos and color. You follow the crowd beyond the fields and find it, a wild tangle of stalls, tents, makeshift wagons turned into stages. Flags flap from crooked poles, smoke curls from food fires, laughter rolls through the air, thick and honeyed. You pass a stall with sugar-dusted fritters, one with wax candles shaped like saints, and one that looks suspiciously like the Reeve. Another stall sells garlands woven with dried lavender and lucky beans, which the seller claims keep away curses, rats, and annoying in-laws. You pause at the apothecary's booth. It's a table sagging under jars of colored powders and mystery liquids. The old woman behind it beckons you with a crooked finger. This'll fix your knee. You haven't told her about your knee. And this, she adds, holding up a vial of greenish goo, makes dreams sweeter. You ask what's in it. She winks, doesn't answer. Historians still argue whether these cure peddlers actually believed in their wares or were simply clever performers. Some recipes included fennel, honey, and crushed pearls. Others, dried frogs, a sliver of beetle shell, possibly chalk, possibly wishful thinking. Further on, a man is selling instant eyebrows, tufts of wool glued to bits of twine, for when you want to look surprised. Next to him, a child's trying to balance on stilts made from broomsticks while their sibling cheers, "Fall, fall!" You turn a corner and nearly trip over a juggler. He's in full regalia, patched tunic, striped hose, and a hat with a single feather that's either heroic or completely ridiculous. He's tossing knives, real ones, badly, but no one seems to mind. The crowd claps at every catch, gasps at every fumble. Then he adds a twist, literally spinning mid-throw, catching a blade behind his back and shouting, "That one was for your sins." He bows deeply, nearly losing his hat. Coins scatter into his cap. He salutes you. You salute back. It's what heroes do. A traveling troupe begins a skit nearby. The king wears a crown made from cheese rind. The queen is clearly a man with a pillow stuffed down his front. The knight rides a stick horse and challenges the blacksmith's boy to a duel over the last apple. You laugh. So does everyone else. It's crude. It's chaotic. It's perfect. Fun fact, these performances, called mummings or pageants, often had moral messages hidden beneath the silliness. A fool might reveal truth. A drunkard might repent. A fake miracle might remind people to be wary of the real ones. And there's music everywhere. Fiddlers, flautists, one fellow playing a 3-stringed instrument that sounds like a duck sneezing, but somehow keeps the beat. People dance in 2s and 3s, stomping feet, clapping hands, sometimes colliding. No one minds. You buy a honey cake. You eat it too fast. You regret nothing. A little girl walks past wearing a crown made of wildflowers and fish bones. She grins like a pirate queen. Behind her, a stall offers beard extensions made of dyed horsehair. You try one on. You look terrible. You buy it anyway. Then you hear the barker. Roll up, behold the miracle goose. She honks in Latin. You absolutely must see this goose. The crowd parts, and there she is, plump, proud, standing on a crate. The barker gestures dramatically. Speak, holy bird, he commands. The goose honks, loudly. Ave Maria, he claims. It honks again. In nomine patri. Is it real? Probably not. Do you care? Absolutely not. You cheer as loudly as anyone. The goose bows, or maybe just scratches. Either way, she's the star of the show. You realize then that this isn't just a fair, it's a release valve, a little world where rules bend, where trades are silly, where saints might have warts, where a juggler with bad aim is worth his weight in laughter. One more tidbit. In some towns, the fair would end with a ritual called the mock election, where villagers elected a lord of misrule, a peasant who ruled for a day, declaring nonsense laws like no shoes after sunset, or all must dance when the rooster crows. You wonder if your village might do that tonight. You hope so. You'd vote for the cheese crown guy. As the fair begins to wind down, you take a last stroll past the booths. A boy tries to sell you magic beans. They're just pebbles. You buy two. The juggler waves as he packs up. The miracle goose is eating someone's bread. The apothecary is asleep, face down in a pile of mint leaves. You smile. Because while your pockets are emptier, your heart feels full. And your fake beard? Still awful. The fair is fading now, like candle smoke curling into the night. But the music hasn't stopped. It's changed. Softer. Stranger. You follow the lilting notes through a thinning crowd and find them. The jugglers, the dancers, the riddle tellers, the gleemen. They've gathered near the edge of the square, where the torchlight dances on wagon wheels and shadows loom long behind apple carts. It's less of a stage, more of a suggestion. A few benches, a raised crate, and everyone leaning in, drawn close like moths to warmth. One man with a lute begins to strum. Another holds juggling pins made from carved wood and painted in faded reds and yellows. A woman stands nearby with bells stitched to her sleeves, hips swaying as she watches the crowd with theatrical suspicion. You settle onto a barrel just as the show begins. The juggler starts simple, 2 pins, then 3. The crowd claps rhythmically, like they're coaxing the air itself to cooperate. He grins, tosses a 4th, then a 5th. He's good, not perfect, but dramatic. He flubs one catch and gasps loud enough to make everyone laugh. He saves it with a flourish and a pirouette. The pins clatter to the ground, and the crowd erupts into cheers. He bows so deeply you fear he may not return. Then the Riddler takes the stage. Who walks with a mouth but makes no sound, yet rules all with no command? The crowd hums, puzzled. A child whispers, "Is it the Reeve?" To which their parent replies, "No, dear." He makes plenty of sound and commands nothing. Eventually, someone guesses, "A road." The Riddler nods solemnly and unpacks a cloth bag of apples, handing one to the winner. The apple has clearly seen better days, but is accepted like a royal prize. Riddles were the Twitter of the medieval world, quick, clever, and often incredibly insulting. You hear one whispered behind you, "What has 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 6 at supper?" You hope it's a chicken. You hope everything is a chicken. Historians still argue whether these entertainers were honored guests or tolerated nuisances. Some believe gleemen served as traveling news, spreading songs and satire from one village to the next. Others think they were mostly freeloaders with excellent hats. The truth? Likely both. Now the dancer steps forward. She moves not like someone performing, but like someone remembering. Her feet tap a rhythm as old as breath itself. Her hands tell stories without words. You catch glimpses in her movement: love, longing, mischief, maybe even mourning. The bells at her wrists chime like distant rain. And then, just when it feels too tender, she breaks into a jig so outrageous that even the cows watching from the paddock look startled. The audience is fully hers. You notice the juggler now trying to balance on a barrel while the riddler throws apples at his head. This seems less choreographed than the rest. You instinctively duck as one flies wide and hits the goat handler. The goat handler doesn't flinch. You suspect this isn't the first time. Fun fact, some medieval entertainers were multi-skilled. They juggled, danced, sang, and told dirty jokes, all in one breath. They were the original variety show, and many traveled with animals, performing dogs, trained birds, or in rare cases, a pig that could allegedly spell words by snuffling out letters from the dirt. No pigs tonight, but someone does have a squirrel wearing a vest. The night deepens, and the jokes grow riskier. Not obscene, nothing that'd make a monk faint, but close. A few snipes at the local reeve, a jab at the baker's wife's third husband, who once tried to invent square bread. The crowd howls. You laugh too, real laughter, from the belly, the kind that leaves you lighter. The lute player begins a quieter tune, something slow, wistful, a ballad. The crowd hushes. It's the story of a man who followed a bird into the forest and forgot how to come home. It's beautiful, strange, and halfway through, a rooster crows from the shadows like a confused critic. You spot the miracle goose in the back, watching, judging. The music fades, the crowd claps gently, and the entertainers bow, not as performers, but as fellow villagers. They pack up their meager props. Coins are dropped into hats, bread crusts, a button, a half candle. Payment enough. You linger. One riddler approaches, offering you a final challenge. I speak without tongue, run without legs, and always come when called. What am I? You pause, think, then murmur, a river. He smiles. You're not so daft after all. You grin. The gleemen depart slowly, their cart creaking into the darkness, pulled by a donkey wearing a flower crown. You wave. They wave back. You stand in the quiet that follows, scented with smoke, honey, and warm grass, and realize how lucky you are to live in a world where people make jokes with apples, juggle knives for strangers, and dance just for the joy of being watched. It's not just entertainment, it's medicine. Soul-tingling, bone-deep, belly-laughing medicine. And tomorrow, when you're back in the fields, your hands blistered and your knees sore, you'll still hear the echo of that riddle, that song, that donkey's bray, and you'll smile all over again. The fair is fading now, like candle smoke curling into the night. But the music hasn't stopped. It's changed. Softer. Stranger. You follow the lilting notes through a thinning crowd and find them. The jugglers, the dancers, the riddle tellers, the gleemen. They've gathered near the edge of the square, where the torchlight dances on wagon wheels and shadows loom long behind apple carts. It's less of a stage, more of a suggestion. A few benches, a raised crate, and everyone leaning in, drawn close like moths to warmth. One man with a lute begins to strum. Another holds juggling pins made from carved wood and painted in faded reds and yellows. A woman stands nearby with bells stitched to her sleeves, hips swaying as she watches the crowd with theatrical suspicion. You settle onto a barrel just as the show begins. The juggler starts simple, 2 pins, then 3. The crowd claps rhythmically, like they're coaxing the air itself to cooperate. He grins, tosses a 4th, then a 5th. He's good, not perfect, but dramatic. He flubs one catch and gasps loud enough to make everyone laugh. He saves it with a flourish and a pirouette. The pins clatter to the ground, and the crowd erupts into cheers. He bows so deeply, you fear he may not return. Then the Riddler takes the stage. Who walks with a mouth but makes no sound, yet rules all with no command? The crowd hums, puzzled. A child whispers, "Is it the Reeve?" To which their parent replies, "No, dear. He makes plenty of sound and commands nothing." Eventually, someone guesses, "A road." The Riddler nods solemnly and unpacks a cloth bag of apples, handing one to the winner. The apple has clearly seen better days, but is accepted like a royal prize. Riddles were the Twitter of the medieval world, quick, clever, and often incredibly insulting. You hear one whispered behind you, "What has 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 6 at supper?" You hope it's a chicken. You hope everything is a chicken. Historians still argue whether these entertainers were honored guests or tolerated nuisances. Some believe gleemen served as traveling news, spreading songs and satire from one village to the next. Others think they were mostly freeloaders with excellent hats. The truth? Likely both. Now the dancer steps forward. She moves not like someone performing, but like someone remembering. Her feet tap a rhythm as old as breath itself. Her hands tell stories without words. You catch glimpses in her movement. Love, longing, mischief, maybe even mourning. The bells at her wrists chime like distant rain. And then, just when it feels too tender, she breaks into a jig so outrageous that even the cows watching from the paddock look startled. The audience is fully hers. You notice the juggler now trying to balance on a barrel while the Riddler throws apples at his head. This seems less choreographed than the rest. You instinctively duck as one flies wide and hits the goat handler. The goat handler doesn't flinch. You suspect this isn't the first time. Fun fact, some medieval entertainers were multi-skilled. They juggled, danced, sang, and told dirty jokes all in one breath. They were the original variety show, and many traveled with animals, performing dogs, trained birds, or in rare cases, a pig that could allegedly spell words by snuffling out letters from the dirt. No pigs tonight, but someone does have a squirrel wearing a vest. The night deepens, and the jokes grow riskier, not obscene, nothing that'd make a monk faint, but close. A few snipes at the local reeve, a jab at the baker's wife's third husband, who once tried to invent square bread. The crowd howls. You laugh too. Real laughter from the belly, the kind that leaves you lighter. The lute player begins a quieter tune, something slow, wistful, a ballad. The crowd hushes. It's the story of a man who followed a bird into the forest and forgot how to come home. It's beautiful. strange. And halfway through, a rooster crows from the shadows like a confused critic. You spot the miracle goose in the back, watching, judging. The music fades, the crowd claps gently, and the entertainers bow, not as performers but as fellow villagers. They pack up their meager props. Coins are dropped into hats, bread crusts, a button, a half candle. Payment enough. You linger. One riddler approaches, offering you a final challenge. I speak without tongue, run without legs, and always come when called. What am I? You pause. Think. Then murmur. A river. He smiles. You're not so daft after all. You grin. The gleemen depart slowly, their cart creaking into the darkness, pulled by a donkey wearing a flower crown. You wave. They wave back. You stand in the quiet that follows, scented with smoke, honey, and warm grass, and realize how lucky you are to live in a world where people make jokes with apples, juggle knives for strangers, and dance just for the joy of being watched. It's not just entertainment, it's medicine. Soul-tingling, bone-deep, belly-laughing medicine. And tomorrow, when you're back in the fields, your hands blistered and your knees sore, you'll still hear the echo of that riddle, that song, that donkey's bray, and you'll smile all over again. The village is hushed now. No more juggling, no more miracle geese. Even the fiddles have stopped, their last note hanging like mist in the air before fading into the soft crackle of torches and the occasional sneeze from someone who clearly danced barefoot through wet grass. You'd think the day is over, but there's one last hurdle to navigate before night truly settles. The Sabbath. You feel it in the way people speak a little more carefully, glance a little more sideways, like the fun has to be weighed now, measured against something holier. The church's long shadow stretches far, even into the alehouse, even into laughter. Sunday fun is real, but so is Sunday guilt. And that's the unspoken game now. How much fun is too much? Some say it's fine to dance, so long as it's not near the chapel. Others say no music at all. Some whisper that even smiling too much after Mass is suspicious. There's a balancing act here, and you, like every other peasant, have learned to wobble across that tightrope with practiced grace. A boy is scolded by his aunt for skipping Vespers. A man is reminded not gently that working on a Sunday, even sharpening a blade, isn't strictly allowed. And then, paradoxically, someone else loudly announces that the priest himself was seen trimming his herb garden that morning. Scandal. Historians still argue whether the medieval Sabbath was strictly enforced among peasants. In some regions, it was taken with solemn weight, monitored by local lords and clergy. In others, it seems to have been treated more like a guideline, especially in rural areas where harvesting couldn't exactly pause just because the saints said so. You pass by the chapel and see a few figures inside, praying, kneeling, whispering. Others stand just outside, holding hushed conversations, always within earshot of the door, as if proximity might grant holiness by osmosis. You feel a twinge of guilt yourself, not because you danced or juggled or cheered for a chicken dressed like a bishop, but because you enjoyed it. And enjoyment somehow always feels a bit suspicious when the bells toll in the background. You overhear two women debating whether today's games were joyful or frivolous. One defends the dancing as community spirit. The other raises an eyebrow and mutters something about spinning toward sin. You quietly step away. No need to get caught in the crossfire of passive-aggressive piety. A nearby lad tries to sneak a laugh. His mother elbows him. "It's still Sunday," she warns. It's always still Sunday until the stars come out. You make your way to the stream, seeking quiet, the way some people seek prayer. The water glides past like a ribbon of silver. You dip your fingers into it. Cool, steady, indifferent. The stream doesn't care what day it is. You wonder briefly if God feels the same. Fun fact, there were church councils that debated exactly what kind of behavior violated the Sabbath. One list included playing dice, dancing near graves, and, bafflingly, excessive laughter. You wonder how they measured that. Is there a scale? A saint of chuckling who gets offended? Still, the rules were clear, at least in writing. Sunday was for rest, reflection, refraining, and yet. You remember the priest last Easter joining the dance for a few minutes, his feet awkward, his grin real. You remember hearing him whistle part of a tavern song once before catching himself. These are people, not statues. They feel joy. Even they can't always hide it. And neither can you. You sit on a flat stone by the water, watching stars blink into being above. 1, 2, a whole spray of them, as if God's brush slipped in the dark. You exhale slowly. The guilt is still there, but lighter now, more like mist than mud. A group of older villagers walks past, their voices low. One quotes scripture, another mentions a child's birth. The Sabbath, it seems, is also a time for remembering, for naming, for tying threads of life to something steadier than the weather. You consider for a moment, saying a prayer, not because you're told to, but because it feels like the right kind of pause. You whisper one, awkwardly, quietly. You ask not for forgiveness, but for another Sunday like this, with laughter, with odd hats, with stories and music, and exactly one goose pretending to speak Latin. The stars don't answer, but the wind shifts slightly, carrying the smell of chimney smoke and warm earth. One more little-known tidbit. Some villages held unofficial midnight festivals after Sunday ended, arguing that as soon as Monday began, all bets were off. They'd dance again, laugh again, just minutes into the new day, like joy couldn't be kept down longer than sunset. You like that idea. You rise, brushing moss from your sleeves, and make your way back toward the square. Most of the torches are out now. Only a few glow here and there, flickering like memories. Someone sweeps near the alehouse door. Someone else hums, just under their breath. A lullaby shaped like a hymn. It's still Sunday, but only just. And in a few short hours, you'll be back in the fields, plowing, lifting, sweating through the silence of labor. But for now, just a little longer. You linger in this space between sacred and simple, where joy and guilt take turns holding your hand. The village is nearly silent now, just a few creaks of shutters closing, the soft scuff of feet on packed earth, and somewhere, the lingering hum of someone finishing a song to themselves. You pass the chapel again, its door firmly shut, its stone walls bathed in moonlight like a sleeping giant. You think of all the verses sung there earlier today, some solemn, some sweet, and if you're honest, some suspiciously catchy. You never quite noticed before how musical the day has been. It's as if the Sabbath is wrapped in sound, from the priest's chants to the fiddler's reels, from the jester's rhymes to the quiet ballads shared around the fire. It makes you wonder about the songs sung in worship and whether they always belonged just to God. because there's something about those hymns. Sometimes they feel too familiar, too earthy. You've caught yourself humming one during chores and realized, with a jolt, it wasn't about salvation at all. It was about someone's lost cow, or unrequited love, or ale. And here's the thing. Many of the tunes you hear on Sundays were borrowed, repurposed. Popular melodies, tweaked into pious submission. One verse added about Mary, another about eternal light, and suddenly it's a sanctified song. Historians still argue whether this blending of sacred and secular was deliberate or accidental. Some say the church co-opted local melodies to make worship more relatable. Others argue peasants bent pious songs back toward the lives they actually lived. Either way, the line is blurry. Beautifully blurry. You hum one now. Low and slow. The same melody was used earlier in Mass, but now you're pairing it with lyrics you heard from the baker's daughter. Something about a miller with 2 left feet and a heart made of gingerbread. Definitely not Latin. You pass a group of young people lounging in the grass, softly singing in harmony. No instruments, just voices. One girl is braiding another's hair while they sing. The boy beside them keeps snapping twigs into equal lengths, as if that helps him keep rhythm. You recognize the tune. It was sung during Easter Mass last spring, but these lyrics are different. Bright was the morning, soft was her face. She stole the ribbon and left no trace. You smile. One girl notices you listening and winks. Don't tell the priest. I won't, you say, unless he already knows. Oh, he knows, she laughs. He's the one who taught us the harmony. There it is again, that gentle rebellion, the joy woven under robes, the mischief inside melody. Church may have demanded solemnity, but peasants, they always found a loophole, usually set to a catchy beat. And fun fact, some of the earliest polyphonic songs in England came not from cathedrals, but from alehouses and marketplaces. Someone added a harmony here, a counter melody there, until even the simplest tune became a living thing with layers and limbs. You remember faintly the time a monk visited from a bigger abbey and heard your village choir sing. He praised the tone, then asked what the lyrics meant. The villagers shrugged. No one had actually translated the Latin. They just liked the way it sounded. One boy, eager to please, said it probably meant, God is love, and also we need more ale. The monk laughed, then stopped himself. You keep walking, and somewhere in the distance you hear someone whistling. Not a hymn, a lullaby, maybe one passed down through generations, the kind sung to infants or hummed while kneading dough, or whistled to comfort nervous animals. You've sung it too. Everyone has. And no one really knows where it came from. That's the beauty of it. Songs in this world live long after names fade. You could disappear tomorrow, but the tune you hummed while harvesting onions might live on in a wedding, or a funeral, or some child's game. You pause at the edge of the field where the tall grasses begin. The wind moves through them like a giant breath, and you hear it again. That sense of rhythm. Nature, too, keeps a beat. The crickets chirp in steady cadence. The frogs add bass. The wind is your drum. If the church says the soul lifts in song, then tonight, you're airborne. One last fringe tidbit. Some chroniclers believed certain medieval songs were actually protest in disguise. Love songs that mocked arranged marriage. Work chants that secretly scorned landlords. even lullabies that mourned more than soothed. Music was, in a way, your secret weapon. You sit on a flat rock, knees drawn up, and let a melody rise in your throat. No one hears but the stars. And if God is listening, you hope he likes your improvisation. You think of the girl earlier, singing near the fire. Her voice cracked a little on the high note, but no one minded. It made it more human. And maybe that's what all these songs are. Flawed, lovely, muddy-footed music. Just like their singers. You begin to head back once more, your voice trailing off, your feet soft against the earth. The last notes vanish into the night. And in the silence that follows, you don't feel scolded or sinful or judged. You feel heard. You reach the village square just as the last candle is snuffed out and the night folds in around you like a warm, scratchy blanket. The cobblestones under your feet are still warm from the day's trampling. The air smells like ash, baked bread crusts, and something faintly herbal. Maybe thyme, maybe just someone's sock. It's nearly midnight, but not quite. There's still time. A few stragglers linger near the benches, trading stories, sharing leftover pie crusts, laughing too loudly and shushing themselves right after. You spot a familiar group near the well. One of them is retelling the pig wrestling story for the third time today. It gets funnier with each telling. The pig gets bigger. The mud gets deeper. The screams get more poetic. You take a seat beside them and accept a final swig of cider passed your way. Warm, flat, perfect. Someone offers you half a berry tart. It's missing most of the berries, but still, it's the thought that counts. You feel it now, the ache in your arms from games, the tug in your stomach from laughter, the dust in your throat from too many shouted jokes, and not enough water. Your bones are tired in that beautiful way, like a bell that's just rung true and is still humming in the air. Nearby, a game of last word is underway. It's simple. Whoever delivers the final, funniest, or most ridiculous comment wins the round. Someone says, "The bishop eats bees." Someone else replies, "Better than the bees eating the bishop." That wins. You laugh until your ribs protest. Someone asks if you'll come again next Sunday. You nod. You always come. It's not just tradition. It's therapy, community, chaos wrapped in wool and bread crusts. This isn't a break from real life. This is real life. Historians still argue whether peasant recreation was regular or reserved for rare holy days. But from where you sit, mud on your knees, crumbs in your lap, it feels like every Sunday had the potential to become a celebration. Maybe not always so grand, but always something. Even if it's just this, a circle of warm bodies in the dark, swapping memories like playing cards. A rooster crows, far too early, or too late. It doesn't matter. You stand, stretch, yawn in the kind of exaggerated way that makes other people yawn too. A man claps you on the back. A woman hands you a boiled egg. You didn't ask for one. You take it anyway. You begin your walk home, down the narrow dirt path lit by moonlight and familiarity. And as you do, you pass the remains of the day, the half-crushed maypole, the muddy patch where football became Mortal Kombat, the string of prayer flags someone hung between two trees now fluttering like sleepy ghosts. Everywhere you look, there's a trace of joy. Worn, shared, loved. One last fun fact. In some villages, there was a tradition called the Sunday Reckoning, where people would reflect not on sins, but on jokes. They'd sit quietly and recall the funniest thing they heard that day, believing that laughter was a gift and remembering it was a kind of prayer. You like that. You reach your door, open it, step into the cool stillness of your home. The fire's out. The straw mattress is waiting. Your boots thud softly as you kick them off. And just before you lie down, you whisper the best joke of the day into the air. That miracle goose still owes me a blessing. Then, silence. You crawl into bed, pull the blanket over your shoulders, and sleep comes fast, like a friend who's been waiting at the edge of the field all day, just watching you run and laugh and live. Now the village fades. The lights are gone. The voices drift into memory. The stars, still watching, flicker like they know your name. You lie still in your bed, the echo of dancing still in your legs, the hum of fiddle strings lingering just behind your ears. Outside, the breeze moves slowly through the trees, like a lullaby no one had to compose. It simply exists, like peace, like quiet. And you remember it all. The warm cup of ale, the laughter behind the barn, the rhythm of feet on dirt, the stories told with firelight flickering on old faces, the masks, the whispers, the feeling of being not alone but together, deeply, comfortably, humanly. Your body is heavy now, a good heaviness, the kind that says, you did something today. You belonged. Even the aches are gentle now. Even the bruises feel like part of a gift. Let your breath slow. Let your mind ease. The village is still there, behind your closed eyes, and maybe, if you listen hard enough, you'll hear the echo of a maypole ribbon rustling, or the clatter of knucklebones falling just right, or a low, off-key voice trying to remember the words to a hymn that was never entirely sacred. You are safe here. You are seen. You are part of something ancient and ordinary and utterly precious. So rest. Let the fields be silent. Let the hearth grow cool. Let your dreams rise slowly, like smoke from a morning fire. The Sabbath has passed, and sleep is calling your name.